Carole Obley has written a new book called The Art of Sensing, and I think it's really a book that's about the conversation with the divine. How do we here in the physical world listen and become cognizant of that wonderful intuition and wisdom that can come from a constant connection with the divine? To do that, in this interview, Carole talks about 6 different things that I think are really helpful. The first is how and why should we be following the voice of the soul? Second, she goes in and then talks about the common questions people ask, what is my purpose and how do I connect? That I think that could be, her answers to those are really helpful. Third, and this is my personal favorite in this interview, where she talks about how do we eliminate suffering and how can we not have such a collision course with the physical universe. Fourth, there's another section where she takes the ego and our personality and the soul, and she puts some really nice definitions around them so that we can approach this topic in a way that gives us more clarity. Fifth on her list is the dark night of the soul. For many of us, this is a pivotal moment in our lives, and she addresses it beautifully. And lastly, again, back to eliminating suffering, and this time she addresses it in a different lens, and that is by acknowledging and working with natural law. I think you'll find this to be a fascinating interview. Here's a quick bio of Carole Obley. She is an acclaimed spiritual medium and popular author. Carole has been the bridge between heaven and earth for more than 15,000 group and individual readings. She is an advanced intuitive and delivers regularly specific practical guidance in readings about a wide variety of life issues, including relationships, business, and personality. She is recognized by clients for bringing compassion and integrity to mediumship and her sincere intent to be of service to others. I think you'll pick up that sense of compassion and service in this interview with Carole Obley. Carole, welcome back to the Afterlife Files. You are a returning champion, and I think it's our first one.
Thanks for having me, Scott. My pleasure.
So, the reason we invited you back was that you've got a great new book. It's called The Art of Sensing. And I would love for you to kind of give us an overview about what this book is about, and then we'll dive right into the specifics.
The art of sensing is about following the voice of our soul. And that voice comes to us through this thing called intuition. And we've heard that phrase, the still small voice and the quiet voice, as opposed to our rational mind, which seems to always be screaming at us, or I call it the treadmill of the mind. In contrast, intuition of the soul is sort of our inner compass, and it's leading us always in 2 directions. Number 1, what we signed up for before being born. In other words, what soul lessons do I need to learn this time? And secondly, it's always leading us to a more connect, deeply connected pathway with the Creator, God, Spirit, whatever you would like to call that. The soul is always seeking to return to the Creator. And that's the sole reason why we are here, here meaning on the physical plane. Now, the reason I wrote this was because after 30 years of doing readings as a professional medium, I kept hearing the same questions over and over.
Yep.
One of those, what is my purpose? That's what I call the $1 million question. What is my purpose? And also, how do I connect with my intuition? How can I distinguish between my rational mind and my intuition? And the other reason I wrote this book, The Art of Sensing, was because of the tumultuous times that we're all in right now.
Amen on that one, Carol.
And so many people that I speak with talk about things changing. There's a lot of chaos. Um, there's of course, especially here in the United States, a lot of division between people. And I wanted to perhaps shed some light for people to understand that despite our outer differences, whether that be religion, politics, culture, race, gender, that we have a unifying factor or energy, and that is our soul. We are each a divine soul. Those were the inspirations for writing The Art of Sensing.
I love that. And thank you for taking that on right now, because I know that those messages are going to be really important to people. So tell me, why is it important that people pay attention to their intuition?
Well, I distinguish between sort of what I call mundane intuition. It doesn't mean it's not valuable, but it's that gut feeling, that knowing that we get that, well, we're driving to work. I don't know why, but I feel like I shouldn't go down that particular road today.
Yeah.
And then later on, we find out, oh, there was a major accident on that road. And so our intuition was acting as a protective mechanism. And there are many examples where people get a gut knowing about other people, about a room, about a place, a situation. And those are all valuable. In The Art of Sensing, I write specifically about spiritual intuition, meaning the voice of the soul that prompts us to go down a particular pathway, to meet with a person, to go to a particular class or work on a project. And 9 times out of 10, these situations are going to be for the growth of our soul. And
Mm.
the soul being infinitely wise and not knowing anything about time, which is an artificial construct. The soul is always aware. It always has awareness. It never sleeps. And if we follow that, we're going to eliminate a lot of suffering for ourselves. And we put that out into the collective of humanity and the earth. And that's our contribution from our soul level. And I wish it was taught in grade school up to develop one's intuition and to follow that instead of questioning it or doubting it.
So following our intuition, and well, I should say acting on that intuition, um, helps us accomplish our mission, if I heard you correctly. And that in turn helps us as a human community grow and learn and gain wisdom. Am I tracking here?
Yes, because one person is a microcosm of the totality of all there is. So, and importantly, and this is where the ego kind of misleads us. One soul is not more valuable or important than another. And it doesn't matter who you are in life, what you're doing, where you've come from, nobody can take your place in the unfolding divine plan. So the Creator does not favor one soul over another. And that's the great equalizing factor for all of us. And the other one is none of us have the past. We can't hold the past in our hand, nor can we hold the future in our hand. What we can experience is the present moment. And that's where the soul and intuition communicates. And it doesn't care if, a common question that I get through many years of doing readings, because in addition to connecting many people with their loved ones in spirit, I also do a lot of life guidance. And so a common question that people will have is, well, when is that going to happen? When? So I know that they're coming from their rational mind when they ask that. And I've asked that in readings that I've had many years ago. But the important thing to remember is the soul has this thing called divine timing. And so divine timing means when the conditions are correct, when they're optimal for um, the manifestation to take place, that's when everything will coalesce. And that's when we see that, oh, now I understand why I had to wait. Now I understand why, this took as long as it did, or whatever the circumstances might be.
You use the word ego, and so how is ego related to personality, related to the soul? I get people get confused about how we separate those out.
Well, one of the reasons I moved away from, quote, New Age philosophy was because I felt that a lot of it demonized the ego and made it into something very negative. And it's not. It's necessary. Why? Why is it necessary? Because the ego sees in duality. The nature of the physical plane is duality, meaning there's dark and light, there's masculine, there's feminine, there's good and bad, there's night and day. These are all necessary teaching circumstances or conditions for us to evolve through. If we did not know sadness, for example, we would not know what happiness is. And that's actually one of the natural laws that I wrote about, the divine laws in the art of sensing, the law of polarities and the law of comparing things, meaning nothing really has any meaning unless we compare it to something else. So why is duality necessary for us to evolve as souls? Because it provides the perfect opportunity, and again, this is paradoxical, to sort of find out who we're not, um, and find out who we are. So through suffering, which is part of the physical plane, Buddhism talks a lot about the nature of life is suffering. I would agree with that. However, we don't have to suffer. We can choose instead to look at whatever happens that's painful, a divorce, the loss of a job, a death of a loved one, a serious illness, any of these circumstances that are sort of, commonplace. that we can choose to reframe it and look at a painful experience as simply an experience that the soul is having.
Mhm.
And that sort of puts us into the space of becoming the observer. And in no way am I suggesting to squash your feelings or to not validate feelings. You absolutely have to do that. That's the other tenet of New Age philosophy I do not agree with at all. And that is that feelings like anger or sadness or jealousy, any of the human feelings, are bad. They're not bad. They're simply experiences. Yes, they're being projected from our ego. And the personality, by the way, is everything about a person that's unique. You have a certain personality. I have a certain personality. Believe it or not, the soul chooses the personality before being born.
I would guess that to be true because if we have a mission, we should have a personality that enhances that mission.
That's exactly correct. And so the soul, again, in its infinite wisdom, knows what is going to advance its growth
Hmm.
here. And so it's sort of like staging a room, or if you're into theatrical things like I am, um, setting the stage. And then the actors come on. We're the actor. And, we play that role. And the personality can also contain aspects of prior lifetimes that we need to continue. We need more experience with. We need to work through those particular aspects. So let's say that in prior lifetime, I was exceedingly impatient. So I might have, parts of that left in this particular lifetime so that it will bring it up again for me to balance. And even though we don't understand a lot of this, it's nonetheless true. And that's why my studies in metaphysics, I've learned so much that, science, psychology, the medical field really invalidates and doesn't look at what the contributing factors are, to why is this person like this? Why is this particular aspect of the personality there? Phobias, are often based in prior lifetimes, just to give an example.
Yep.
So none of these are bad. The personality, the personality is an extension of the ego. The ego is part of the rational mind. The soul is a distinct entity from the personality. The personality should be a servant of the soul and not the other way around. And a lot of times we get that mixed up.
I love that. In your book, you talk about inner and outer landscapes. What are those, and how does that relate to this conversation?
Well, the inner landscape is that sacred, eternal, uh, the English language is really bereft of adequate terms to use for this thing. In other cultures, in other languages, they have words that mean, things other than energy. And I don't know what to use in English other than the energy of the soul. That's the inner landscape, which is unchangeable. So no matter what circumstance we face, and we're always going to see changing circumstances in the physical world. That's the nature of it. Everything here will one day die, even if it's an inanimate object like a building, it will wear out, it will crumble. But everything dies or deteriorates at some point. What does not deteriorate is the inner landscape of the soul. The outer landscape, by contrast, is other people. It's the physical landscape that we live in. It's our culture. It's our body. Anything external to the inner reality of the soul, I consider the outer landscape.
And so our thoughts, is are they part of the inner and outer? Because I'm having this phrase that keeps running through my head, which is, "Don't believe everything you think."
Well, that's true. I had a firsthand lesson with that. I've written about it in my prior books. I had essentially what you would call a nervous breakdown. And this was, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was brought on by a tremendous amount of stress, a lot of things on my plate at the same time. And these thoughts, and anyone who's had anxiety knows what I'm talking about here with repeating thoughts, repetitive thoughts over and over and over. And well, this is going to happen. That's going to happen. What if you get sued? All of these thoughts coming up. And so, what I had to learn to do, I studied a course on mindfulness, and mindfulness uses the breath because the breath is always available. It doesn't cost anything. You can do it anywhere. And the breath will pull you into the inner landscape. It will pull you into that inner reality. Once you're in there, it enables you to connect with the higher awareness of your soul and to become the observer who pulls back from the thoughts that your mind is saying, this is true. But in reality, what it is a belief. We can call it a belief. To me, a belief implies, I think that's true, but it may not be true. But the mind becomes, because I believe because of its repetition, almost like I'm dating myself on this one, Scott, but like a record, a vinyl record,
Oh
those
no.
those grooves. Yeah, I have a whole record collection, two orange crates in my in my basement here.
You
But
know they're back in fashion now, so
I
you're
know
right
they,
with it. You can bring them back out.
yes, and I do have a record player that I purchased. So, but we get stuck in that groove. The mind goes over and over and over. And so that can actually change us neurologically, where we react. It's called the reactive mind, right? You snap your fingers and you go from A to Z in like 2 seconds. It's called catastrophizing too. So, these are sort of psychological terms. What mindfulness does is enable us to pull back from the thoughts and from these beliefs, many of which are false. But the mind goes, no, you better be prepared because this is true. This is going to happen. The soul simply is the observer of this. And that's why it's so important that people connect with their soul, I would say, on a daily basis. And this doesn't have to be an hour-long meditation or, you're sitting on a satin pillow and going onto a mountaintop or any of that. It's simple. Sitting, you can do it at your desk, at work, and just closing your eyes during lunch break or whatever. Focusing on the breath, it's a reset. And it kind of clears out. It's sort of like a refreshing breath that, allows us to detach from all of this myriad of thoughts. And I would also add, we live in an age that we're inundated constantly with information. The internet, texting, emails. television, radio. We've had television and radio for many years, but I think the internet, and especially with cell phones, I see so many people completely consumed on their phones and they're unaware of the present moment, you know? Um, so pulling back from that is gives you the ability to connect with your soul.
That, given what we started from, that idea that, right now it seems to be a chaotic world, which just means there's even more information coming to us that doesn't seem to make any sense or creates fear, really says that we need this practice. We need to be able to pull back. We need to have this way where we can, I'm going to say, evolve into a state where we can be here in duality and not be of duality. If that makes sense. Um, so, other recommendations that you have for us on how we can evolve as a species?
Well, people today, I see so much of people being overly busy. They have so much on their plate. I really consider busyness a choice. And I understand people have a lot going on, certainly, but it's very necessary to carve out the time to be still. And again, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening. People are seeking peace today. I see more young people committing suicide. I mean, it seems like every day I get an email, not personally, but like with in the news, some of these so-called influencers and so forth. And I believe people have lost their the knowledge that it doesn't have to be that way, that they can put the phone down, they can detach from what's going on out there and connect with this still place within. A child can do this. Children are very active, but yet they can focus on their breath and they can know, okay, I don't know why I'm doing this, but it's easy and it's something that can be done anywhere. And then you can go into, there's extensions of mindfulness where you bring up difficult emotions and you notice them. You don't get rid of them, but you just notice them as if they're passing through. And then you go back to the breath. So I really advise people to carve out time. This will change your life. And we were talking, beforehand about people who've had near-death experiences and how that can really be a life-changing event. People are never the same again. And usually for the better. Their intuition opens up. They might become psychic. They might know, a greater ability to serve with the particular talents that they have. They come in contact with those to a deeper, more profound level. And this is also, you don't have to die for that to happen. You can also do it through connection with the soul. And the most common thing I hear from people is, I can't stop my thoughts. And
Interesting.
so my response to that is, you'll never stop your thoughts. Don't even go down that pathway. Allow the thoughts to come up, but then refocus with the breath. And you're not supposed to be seeing anything or hearing anything. This is simply stillness and that peace that the eternal part of us is transmitting to us. That is more important than ever in today's world. The other thing that's epidemic that I see today, and I've written about this in The Art of Sensing, is serious drug abuse. and drug addiction. And I've done many, many readings for parents who have lost children
Mhm.
from drug overdoses, fentanyl, heroin. Commonly, it's fentanyl. Um, and it's absolutely devastating to the family and to the parents. And so, why are so many people, seeking some sort of escape with that? Well, fentanyl is a painkiller. So, in some way, they're feeling pain within their soul, or, not really within the soul, but within the personality. And so, this is a much healthier way to simply notice what's going on, knowing it's not the end of the world, that it's merely, and reframing it as an experience that you're having. And the soul, one lifetime, and this is really cool, Scott. I heard this a long time ago and it blows my mind. One lifetime to the soul is like one grain of sand on a beach. And when you think about the number of grains of sand on a beach, I mean, it can go into infinity, I'm sure it's finite, obviously, but uh, you know,
This too shall pass, whatever
this
it
too
is.
shall pass. My spirit guides told me that a long time ago. And I was pretty angry when they said that. And I'm like, when? When is
Oh
it
yeah,
gonna-
back to that whole there's no time on the other side. They're bad at that.
Well,
Hey,
they laugh sometimes. My spirit guides, the souls who help me on my pathway, they'll kind of chuckle, and I'm like, come down here, I'll talk to you. But they know what I signed up for this time. And they know all of the spirit guides know what we're to be learning this time because we sat with them before we came here into physical form.
so if we're supposed to be learning, that implies that there's, stages to our growth. Um, in all your years of working with people, what have you seen in terms of how people grow and develop that sense of wisdom?
The school of hard knocks.
Amen.
Really,
Yeah.
I'm going to say this. One of my favorite modern spiritual teachers, I think Jesus was the all-time spiritual teacher. But my modern spiritual teacher, one of them is Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now and A New Earth, Finding Your Life's Purpose. And he talks about the opportunity when something very, very painful or tragic happens in our life, whatever form that takes, it's an opportunity, it's an opening, it's a window that opens up for us to evolve. Now, let me say this. In the middle of that, very rarely do we see it that way. And we do not understand. My experience has been we generally do not understand how am I going to grow from, I was at this company for 25 years and all of a sudden I go in on a Friday and they're giving me a pink slip and I'm done. And the world has come to an end, or, my child died, or I was just diagnosed with cancer, whatever it might be, that's very devastating to us. Um, we don't see when we're in the middle of it what opportunity is there. But if we stay the course, and this is probably the hardest thing for us to do because our ego wants what it wants it now or yesterday. And you know, uh, but staying the course will enable that window to be swung wide open, the door to open to other growth, other opportunities.
So that dark night of the soul, that happens to us all. Um, what I get stay the course, but talk more about that. How we can get through that period of such uncertainty and pain.
Yeah, I wrote about the dark night of the soul and the art of sensing, because it's a human condition. And, this was originally written about by Saint John of the Cross. I believe it was in the 17th century, many years ago. And he did not label it as the dark night of the soul. It was labeled that long after his death. But what happened was St. John felt very abandoned. He was a Christian mystic, and he followed God. He loved God. And something occurred, and he felt abandoned by God. He felt alone. He felt hopeless. And so these are some of the qualities of the dark night. And I think a lot of us have those. Maybe we're lucky, maybe we don't have those in our life. But guaranteed, some time in your existence as a soul, you're going to have the dark night. And so, we've heard that expression, hang in there. It's sort of a cliche, but that's what we have to do. And I will tell you another quality that we can call upon. We're in the midst of a dark night, and that's gratitude. Now, that's difficult sometimes for people to find when they feel totally hopeless. What do I have to be grateful for? You might ask. Well, it might be as simple as, I got a soft, clean bed, that I sleep in. I have clean air. I have water. I turn on a tap. There are people in the world who don't have those. And just take a look around at some other countries. They don't have those luxuries. And so becoming grateful, because what that does is it lifts the vibration. If everything is energy, and it is, you and I are energetic beings, all souls are. It lifts the vibration out of that very dense, uh, the low end of the spectrum of grief, sadness, anger, betrayal, whatever it is that we're feeling there. Fear is very dense, very dense. It's a common human experience. Gratitude helps to raise us out of that very low vibration. If you can find three things before you get out of bed in the morning to be grateful for, and again, these might be very simple. I can get up, I can stand on my legs. There are people in our world who can't do that. They can't stand up, or they're paralyzed or whatever. So, finding things to be grateful for. I also recommend keeping a little journal. Write your feelings down. Nobody's going to see that but you. Within Art of Sensing, I have exercises in each chapter that people can do. These are simple, they don't cost any money. You can do them at home, you can go out in nature and do them. In fact, nature is a very, very healing environment to be in when we're in the dark night, because I always feel it's impossible to be really down in the dumps and depressed when you're in a beautiful garden or when you're walking, through a green meadow or something. And yeah, your thoughts might still be going, but walking in nature, you can stop the mind with the thoughts, the repetitive thoughts and emotions, by just noticing, oh, the color of the grass. There's a tree. There are buds on the tree. There's a bird. I hear a bird singing. And not trying to label everything, but simply noticing it. And what that does is it brings you into presence,
Yep.
which is where the soul is.
Yep. So being out in nature reminds me that that word um, struck a chord because another one of the things you talk about are natural laws. Um, what are they, and why should we pay attention to them?
Natural laws are also called universal laws. They were put into effect. I don't know when. I don't think anyone knows when. It's sort of like, well, we discovered the law of gravity, but how long has gravity been around? We don't know. Now, that's a physical law. And there are also the physical laws of physics. Natural laws operate completely independently of our awareness of them. They operate independently of human-made law. They are spirit's laws. One that most people are familiar with is the law of karma, or the law of cause and effect. For every cause, there will be an effect. For every effect, there is a cause. Everything on this physical plane was first a thought. So you might say, well, was a tree a thought? I believe it was a thought of God. An animal was a thought of spirit. We were a thought, an expression of the Creator saying, I want to experience myself, this desire, this thought in that form, in human form. So yes, the law of karma. The law of karma is really, and the law of cause and effect is, they're kind of similar. There are seven main laws, and we won't get into all of those for, our time doesn't permit, but most people are familiar with what we put out, we're going to receive. The only element there that can be different is time. So in the spirit world, when you think of something, or oh, okay, I died. I want to think of my child who's still on the earth plane. Just thinking, if I think of that child and I'm pure spirit, I'm instantly with that child. I'm aware of them. There's no time there. And thought it's not dense. Like here, this is a 3D reality. The atoms are very close together, they're very dense. In the spirit world, it is not like that. It's a realm of thought and emotion. And so the difference is here we have this element of time. So natural law is always operating. There will always be karma. I laugh when I see people go, well, I'm not going to have karma anymore. Really? So that means you're just going to sit here like a statue and not do anything. Even that can be karmic. So what we create is what we receive. It's a boomerang. It will return. It may return in another incarnation. It may return relatively quickly. One of the things that I've noticed in my work of doing a lot of spiritual work is that the higher up you go in consciousness, the faster karma comes back. And it's sort of like, you've eliminated some of the density there. So the return, the return is quicker. And you can even see this operating in our world, synchronicity, and go, isn't that ironic that he was against this, or she was, she did this, killed somebody or whatever. And then boom, something comes back to that individual. So natural laws, whether you believe in them or not, they're always operating. So it's sort of like if I say to you, well, I got a pencil here, I'm going to push it off my desk. I don't believe in gravity. And I push the pencil and it falls to the ground. It doesn't care. The law of gravity doesn't care if I think it's real or not. And that is the same way with natural law. And if people would just understand what you do to another, and that includes animals, you do to yourself.
And do these
That's important.
natural laws apply only in duality or both in duality and in the unity state?
I believe that they apply to all souls in all places. And again, our ignorance of the laws. I studied actually multiple times an 8-hour course on YouTube. And then I developed a workshop that I taught on natural laws so that people could understand and to live by the law. Why should we know these? Because if you live in harmony, which is also the soul's laws, we could call them the soul's laws too. You're going to eliminate a lot of suffering for yourself and a lot of troubles if you live in accordance. If I know for truth and fact that if I harm you, that is me harming myself.
Yep.
And I mean, in addition to it's wrong, right? It's morally wrong to harm another human being or to harm an animal. Um, so, if people really knew this, imagine the world we would have. We would have a much different world. The wars in the Middle East, all wars, um, initiating war, initiating violence, stealing. Eventually, you are the one. If you're the thief or if you're the murderer, that will return to you.
So, Carol, we're bumping up against our time limit here. I'd like to go way back to the beginning when we talked about our chaotic world. And I know the art of sensing helps us to navigate that. So, give us your last best advice on being in this world and being our best in this world during uncertain times.
Know that you're here for a purpose. You're not here by accident. You are meant to be here at this time. This is a very challenging time. However, my reality is this: human beings have always had a difficult time here. There have always been wars, there has always been violence. We just know about it now because of the internet and because of television. But if we go back in history, and we know from history books, we've always been violent towards one another. There's always been chaos. There's always been overthrows of governments and many different things that we find very unpleasant. So I don't know that it's more chaotic than past times. However, nobody can take your place in the unfolding divine plan. You are valuable, and following the voice of your soul and paying attention to it, importantly, trusting it, will make life a lot less burdensome and a lot more directed through your intent of following that voice of your soul.
Lovely. And how can people find more about you, Carol?
On the web, soulvisions.net, that's my website. All of my books are available on my website. I also have a meditation CD there, Reconnect, and a 3 CD set. Developing your spiritual intuition, igniting your spiritual intuition. That's a home study course. Also on Amazon.com. The book is available also on audio or ebook, Kindle, and Barnes and Noble. Also, my publisher, collectiveinc.com.
Nice. So thank you. It's really been a pleasure to have you with us, Carol. Thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
And for those of you watching, stick around because I've got a couple comments that I think you're going to find interesting about some of the things Carole had to say. In our interview, Carole Obley said something that really piqued my attention, which was that individuals are microcosm of the macrocosm, meaning that what we experience as individuals has a profound effect not only on us, but on all of humanity. Because we live outside of time and space, where we are actually all part of this one huge human plane of existence, it means that when we gain some wisdom based on our experience, it not only gives us wisdom, but it feeds our collective consciousness as well. So when somebody advances, we all advance. If somebody is hurt, well, we are all hurt. And so I think that this concept of we are a microcosm of the macrocosm really gives us a beautiful insight into our true nature and why we are here in the physical world in order to grow, to experience, so all of us can benefit. Thank you for being with us on the Afterlife Files. I'll see you next time.